Hi everyone and welcome back to the Data Football Club. A few months ago, I was releasing a video on the analysis of the Men's World Cup that saw Argentina beat France. Even if I did predict before the World Cup that Argentina would win, the outcome was still hard to bounce back from as a Frenchman. Anyway, Data FC is now back for the Women's World Cup starting on the 20th of July in Australia and New Zealand. After accurately predicting the winner of the Men's FIFA World Cup, let's see if I can do the same for the women, both from a quantitative and qualitative perspective as usual. With no further ado, let's get the ball rolling. So I'm not going to surprise anyone if I say that the US are the obvious favorites of this competition. With 4 titles, the back-to-back champions are certainly dreaming of a 3rd trophy in a row. It could be a last dance for the legends of the likes of Alex Morgan and Megan Rapinoe, for whom it will most likely be their ultimate World Cup. Their main contender on paper could be Germany, even though I wouldn't underestimate Australia, who could be a massive surprise at home with world-class striker Sam Kerr. Anyway, let me share with you a qualitative prediction based purely on what I think will happen from watching the qualifying rounds and from my own guesswork. So let's start with Group A. New Zealand, as the co-host, definitely has a chance in this group. With Norway almost guaranteed to finish at the top, it means that New Zealand and Switzerland will battle for 2nd place. I'm going to go with New Zealand for the qualifying spot, being at home, and with Captain Ali Riley leading the solid line of defense. And no offense to the Philippines, but I would be surprised if they manage to obtain a win in this group. In Group B, with the other co-host of the competition, there will certainly be a tough battle for 1st place between Australia and Canada. Even though Canada could be considered as the slight favorite, I'm going to go for Australia for 1st place and Canada 2nd, as I believe in the home advantage for the Matildas, as well as Sam Kerr, who had a very successful season at Chelsea. We'll see if Canada with Christine Sinclair have something to say about that. Group C seems like a no-brainer to me, with Alexia Putellas back from her injury for Spain, who will most likely finish in 1st place, and Japan, one of the 4 teams who ever won the competition, who should place 2nd. I don't see how Costa Rica and Zambia could hope for more in this group. Group D is the one that is the most open for debate. Even though England will most likely end up in 1st place, China and Denmark will represent a tough opposition for the other qualifying spot. Funny enough, both teams will start the competition placed 14th and 13th of the FIFA ranking. China has always qualified for the knockout rounds since the 1st edition of the competition. And actually, China and Denmark happen to have been in the same group 3 times and China always finished in front, and I'm not saying that changed this time round. Group E will certainly see the US qualify in 1st place, and it seems to me that the Netherlands will be in their footsteps. Portugal could maybe hope for 2nd place, but I reckon the difference of level between them and the 2 teams I placed first is too large. Group F will most likely come down to the match between Brazil and France for 1st place. And for that one, I'm definitely rooting for France. How surprising. With the new coach Hervé Renard, who brought back our legendary captain Amandine Henry, I believe Brazil will have a hard time against us. With world-class players on every line, Wendy Renard in defense, Amandine Henry in the midfield, and Speedy Diani in front, France will be a solid contender for the final trophy. In Group G, Sweden will certainly finish 1st, and the real unknown qualifying spot is between Italy and Argentina. And for that one, I'm pretty sure Italy will go through with a pretty homogeneous group of players, mostly coming from Juventus and Roma, and with the wonderful Cristiana Girelli in front. Another great contender in Group H is Germany, who will most likely end up 1st of the group. It's not so obvious to me whether South Korea will qualify, as Colombia might pose some serious threats to the Korean team. Both teams only qualified once to the knockout rounds, with a surprising win against Spain for South Korea and a win against France for Colombia, both in 2015. Colin Bell, the South Korean manager, will most likely start the competition with a 3-5-2, banking on experienced defensive players and on the living legend Ji So-yoon, who won 12 trophies with Chelsea. I think Catalina Usme, Colombia's number 10, will have a hard time against the South Korean defense, and I think the Korean team will qualify in 2nd place. Moving on to the knockout rounds, many big games are already happening, firstly with Norway against Japan, 2 of the 4 teams who already won the competition. For this one, I'm pretty sure Norway will go through with Ada Hegerberg's big comeback. She's only had 8 appearances this season with Lyon, but the first ever Ballon d'Or winner will definitely have at heart to perform well after a 5-year absence in the national team. For the 2nd game of the round of 16, Spain will most likely beat Switzerland with the 2 times Ballon d'Or Alexia Putellas back on the pitch after a long injury. USA vs Italy might hold some surprises for us, but I do believe that the natural hierarchy will be respected and the teammates of Alex Morgan should go through. With Sweden against the Netherlands, we have another big game of this round of 16. The Dutch team will certainly find it hard to defend against the two marvelous Swedish wingers, Jakobsen and Rolfo. Not to mention Blackstenius in front, Sweden probably has one of the scariest forwards of the competition. Fortunately for the Netherlands, they have one of the best goalkeepers, Daphne van Damslaar. This is a tough one, but I'm going to go with the Netherlands as I think they are the most balanced team of the two. Australia versus China is the fifth game of our simulation, and even though China will be tough to beat, I'm pretty sure Australia will go through. England versus Canada seems also to be a very interesting game, but again, for me it is fairly certain that the Lionesses will go through. Coming back to my dear France against South Korea, I do believe that it should be a pretty easy game for France, who already beat South Korea 3-0 in 2015 for the only appearance of South Korea in a round of 16 of a World Cup. And to end this round, Germany versus Brazil, another magnificent game in perspective, will most likely see Germany winning. The quarterfinals actually seem pretty clear to me, with the US, who should definitely qualify, against a Norwegian team who has not qualified to the semifinals since 2007. I also see Spain winning against the Netherlands without too much doubt. Same for France against Australia. The one game that is quite undecided in my opinion is England versus Germany. Banking on their 2022 Euro win, the English team really impressed me, and I do believe they have what it takes to beat Germany again. That gives us two exciting semifinals: the US versus Spain and France against England. This is where my predictions go wild, but please bear with me. I think Spain actually has a very decent chance to beat the US this year. It would of course be a massive upset, but I reckon it can happen considering the lack of experience of some US players in this type of competition. As for the second semi-final, I think the French team will beat the Lionesses and finally reach the final for the first time in their history. And for a historical final between Spain and France, I think Hervé Renard will lead the French team to the final win. Some may say it's a dream, but considering the table and the games played, it does not seem so unrealistic in my opinion. We'll have to wait and see. Alright, moving on to the quantitative section of this video, let's briefly get into the core of the simulation procedure. If you want a more in-depth explanation, check out my previous video on the Men's World Cup. Let's simulate the opening match between New Zealand and Norway. As with the Men's World Cup, we'll use the FIFA ranking for each team, and I've gathered the latest ELO ratings for all the women's national teams as of June 2023. Now, let's predict the number of goals scored by each team using the trusty Poisson distribution, a statistical tool for describing the probability of events occurring a certain number of times. The mean of this distribution depends on two factors: the difference in ELO ratings between the teams and home advantage, which in this case goes to Australia and New Zealand. As the data for the women's team is limited, we'll use the same model coefficients as in the Men's World Cup simulation. New Zealand, with an ELO of 1700, faces Norway with an ELO of 1910. The expected value for New Zealand's goals, according to the model, is around 0.98, and for Norway, it's 1.68. In other words, if we were to repeat the game in the exact same conditions an infinite number of times, we would observe, on average, 0.98 goals for New Zealand and 1.68 goals for Norway. But that's not all, and here's the cool part. With sampling, we can simulate countless possible outcomes of a match. By using the mean of the Poisson distribution, we can generate random results for each team. So sometimes Norway will win, but sometimes New Zealand will win with a lower probability. And even though statistically it is more likely that Norway will win the opening game, football is full of surprises, and this simulation just helps us to understand this randomness. Now that we've seen how to simulate one game, to simulate a whole World Cup, we simply simulate all the games one after the other. Each team's ELO rating is updated throughout the simulation to keep track of their momentum. I've run 10,000 World Cup simulations, so without further ado, let's have a look at the results. Here are the 16 best estimates of the probability of each team being the eventual winner of the World Cup. Unsurprisingly, we find that the teams are pretty much in the same order as the FIFA rankings, which are the basis of our model, so there is nothing really exciting here. However, it is very interesting to see that it is not so clear who will be the final winner, with the US only having a 12% chance of winning the World Cup. France has just over 8% chances of winning, so looking at the US chances, France winning does not seem like a completely crazy outcome. The next table shows the probability of each team in the competition reaching each round. Interestingly, we can see that the US have only reached the final 12% of the time in the 10,000 simulation. So this could be an indication that this World Cup is quite open for a final win. Furthermore, Australia has a 20% chance of reaching the semi-finals, a stage they have never reached in their history. And this probability is really significant. Finally, we can also look at the probability of each team finishing in a particular place in their group. It is clear from this table that, apart from groups D and A, all the groups are likely to have two teams that qualify outright. In particular, Group F, with Brazil and France having more than a 90% chance of qualifying for the knockout rounds, seems quite easy to predict. That was sort of my hunch in the qualitative part of the video I was telling you about earlier. The most exciting group seems to be Group D, with Denmark and China very close for the second qualifying spot. Also, my most unrealistic prediction seems to be that Australia will finish first of their group, as there is only a 35% chance of that happening. There is a lot more analysis that could be done, but I'll leave that to you and look forward to your comments and predictions, so feel free to share your thoughts below the video. I will be covering the World Cup on Instagram, TikTok and YouTube almost every day, so stay tuned. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit that like button and share it with your teammates. And if you want to join the Data Football Club, please subscribe and don't forget to click on the bell icon. See you soon for another video where football's the game and data's the goal. Bye bye!